All right, welcome back. This week, we are diving into what might be a major turning point in the U.S.-Iran war. We've got huge developments happening on two totally different fronts, on the battlefield and behind the scenes at the negotiating table.
So, here we are, day 28. The war is now officially a month old, and honestly, the stakes just keep getting higher.
You know, the really strange thing about this past week is this. You've got two completely opposite things happening at the same time. On the ground, the war is getting bigger, it's spreading. But behind the scenes, you have these very delicate, very fragile negotiations just starting to happen. And that might sound like a contradiction, but it's often not. A lot of times, you crank up the military pressure specifically to get more leverage in those talks. So this whole week is really defined by this push and pull.
So what in the world just happened? How are we seeing this massive escalation in these peace talks all at once? And, what's really at stake here? Let's get into it.
Okay, so the war is now heading into its second month, and this last week, wow, it was a roller coaster of escalating strikes and some incredibly high-stakes diplomacy. Let's walk through how this all played out.
This timeline really tells the whole story, doesn't it? I mean, look at this. On one side, you have the U.S. hitting the pause button on some strikes. That's a huge diplomatic signal, right? But then, almost the next day, Iran just flat out rejects the U.S. proposal and launches its own attacks. So you think, okay, it's all falling apart. But then, the U.S. actually extends its pause, all while at the very same time, U.S. and Israeli forces are hitting these super important Iranian targets. It's this incredible high-stakes dance of attack and de-escalation.
And that's the thing. While the diplomats are talking, the war itself is getting bigger. This is not just a fight inside Iran anymore. It has absolutely spilled over into the region and is turning into a war on multiple fronts.
So, U.S. and Israeli forces are hitting Iran where it really hurts, right at the heart of its strategic power. We're talking about strikes on critical nuclear sites like Arak and Ardakan, plus major industrial hubs that are key to their economy. And then there was this huge blow to Tehran. A targeted strike killed Ali Reza Tangsiri, the IRGC Navy commander. He's the guy who was basically running that blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. But, as you'd expect, the retaliation came fast, with Iran's proxies hitting U.S. bases and even civilian targets, like airports across the Gulf.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of this air campaign, U.S. Central Command is reporting that over 10,000 military targets inside Iran have been struck since this all began. Of course, with that kind of military action, there's a heavy human cost. According to Iran's own deputy health minister, the death toll inside the country has now passed 1,900 people. And the impact is being felt by American forces too. CENTCOM confirmed this week that the number of U.S. troops wounded since the conflict started has now climbed to 303.
So you've got this expanding battlefield. At the same time, there's this other war happening, a diplomatic one, fought through back channels and intermediaries. The only problem? The two sides are just worlds apart.
And I mean, the gap between them is just massive. The U.S. plan is pretty straightforward. They want to roll back Iran's nuclear and missile programs, and they want the Strait of Hormuz reopened. In exchange, they're offering sanctions relief. Iran's response? They pretty much threw it out, calling it one-sided and unfair. Their counterproposal is asking for things like war reparations and total Iranian control over the strait. For Washington, those are complete non-starters.
But even with this deadlock, the U.S. is trying to keep that diplomatic door from slamming shut. That's why they've extended their pause on hitting Iran's energy infrastructure. It's a key part of their air campaign, but they're holding back to give these talks a little more room to breathe.
But here's where it gets really complicated, because this reveals a major crack between the U.S. and its biggest ally in the region. While the U.S. is hitting pause on one part of its campaign, Israel's defense minister is coming out publicly and saying, "Nope, not us. Our strikes are going to continue, and they're going to get worse." This shows that even if the U.S. manages to find some kind of off-ramp, their main partner in this might just stay on the highway.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit, because it doesn't matter where you live, this conflict is starting to affect you. This isn't just a regional war anymore. It's sending these huge, damaging shockwaves through the entire global economy.
And the big one, of course, is the price of oil. I mean, look at this. Before the war, a barrel of Brent crude was about $71. Today, just 28 days later, it shot up to over $113. That is a massive 50% jump, and it's sparking real fears of runaway inflation all over the world. Places like the EU are now looking at a very real risk of recession because of this.
And this is why. It all comes down to the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran has basically blockaded this critical artery for global trade, and it's created a traffic jam like we've never seen before. Daily ship traffic has just collapsed. We're talking about 2,000 ships and 20,000 sailors just stranded. And it's not just oil, you know? It's things like fertilizer which gets stuck and directly threatens the global food supply.
So all of this brings us to the big, critical question. Where does this go from here? You've got the military track and the diplomatic track on a collision course, and frankly, the whole world is just holding its breath.
And everybody's eyes are now on one single date, April 6th. This is the deadline the White House has put on the table. If there isn't a deal by then, that pause on striking Iran's energy infrastructure, it's over. And that means a major line of escalation is about to be crossed.
And that's really the question that's hanging over everything, isn't it? Is this deadline for April 6th a real push for peace, a way to force a breakthrough? Or are we just watching a countdown clock to a much wider, much more destructive war? Honestly, right now, nobody knows, and the world is just waiting to find out.